This story happened when I was just 7 years old. I was still a little kid, but I remember that night in vivid detail. My mom's voice, the glowing numbers on the clock, the sharp click of the door lock, and that eerie music from Home Alone, which still gives me chills to this day. My parents started leaving me home alone pretty early. In the 90s, hiring a babysitter wasn't really a thing. Times were tough, and getting out to see friends was a rare event. That night, they went to someone's birthday party, leaving me alone until morning. It was maybe the second or third time I'd been left by myself. My parents reminded me of the usual rules. Don't watch TV for too long. Turn off all the lights before bed, except for the nightlight by my bed. At the time, I didn't understand why that was so important, but later I would. And most importantly, no matter what, do not open the door. Not even if it's a woman or a child. Not even if someone says there's a fire and I need to get out immediately. Not even if it's someone I know. That night, my dad was especially serious when he repeated this rule. There was something in his voice that made me feel uneasy. My dad crouched in front of me, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Mark, you're a big boy now. You understand responsibility, right? Listen to me carefully. If the clock strikes 12:12 a.m. and you're still awake, do not get out of bed. Do not turn on the lights, and under no circumstances open the door. I'm counting on you, son." I nodded, not fully understanding why he was so serious. My dad was always a bit odd. He had this habit of making up strange rules for me. Some days I wasn't allowed to wear red. Other days I couldn't take a bath. I always mixed them up, and sometimes I even got in trouble for it. To this day, I'm not sure if those rules were just his weird quirks or if there was actually a reason behind them. But one thing stuck with me forever. At 12:12 a.m., the door stays locked. Once my parents left, I waited a couple of minutes, listening to the silence. Then I jumped up and ran through the apartment, turning on every light. Let them all stay on. It's safer this way. The light made the corners less scary. I always felt uneasy when I was home alone. Not exactly terrified, just unsettled, like a cold film clinging to my skin. It wasn't a fear that made me scream or run, but something quieter, something that sat deep inside me, like a shadow in the corner. The TV was my salvation. I plopped down on the couch and turned it on. The screen lit up and a wave of relief washed over me. Home Alone was playing on Channel 5. I knew this movie by heart. I could recite every joke, every trick Kevin pulled. I even quoted his lines to my friends. The movie started with Kevin jumping on the bed, celebrating being home alone. Just like me. Except, I didn't feel like celebrating. The house felt too empty, too quiet. I kept watching, but after about 10 minutes I realized something. I was listening more than watching. It almost sounded like someone was moving near the door outside. Of course, there was no one there. But the thought wouldn't leave my head. What if my parents never came back? What if something happened to them? What if they got robbed or were in a car accident? They were so far away, and I had no idea where exactly. A cold feeling crept through my chest. My palms were suddenly damp. I jumped up from the couch and ran to the phone. A huge cream-colored phone with a long coiled cord. It sat on a shelf in the hallway. I had to stand on my toes just to reach the buttons. My fingers trembled as I dialed. 4, 4, 2, 1, the dial tone once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" A man's voice answered, slow and drawn out. I swallowed and said, just like I was taught, "Hello, this is Mark. Can I speak to my dad, Vladimir Grigorievich, please?" The man laughed and called out to someone. "Vladimir Grigorievich, you got a call." Music blared in the background. People were laughing. I heard the clinking of glasses. "Pour another one," someone shouted. And then, my dad's voice came through. "Dad?" My voice sounded thin, shaky. "Mark, what's wrong?" His voice was muffled, as if the music was swallowing it up. "Are you coming home soon?" "Of course," he chuckled. "You okay?" I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me. "Yeah, good boy. Go to bed. We'll be home soon." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Dad, do you remember what you told me about 12:12? For a second, the line went quiet. It sounded like my dad covered the receiver with his hand. Then his tone changed. He's serious. "Of course I remember. You'll do as I said, right?" Yeah. Good boy." Dad hung up. But for some reason, it didn't make me feel any better. It felt like my parents were far, far away. Like there wasn't just a few miles between us, but an entire other world. I dragged myself back to the living room, curled up on the couch, and stared at the TV. On the screen, Kevin was setting up traps, spreading out toys, pouring water on the steps, dumping feathers near the fan. I knew what was coming next. Harry would run around with his head on fire, Marv would slip on the ice and take an iron to the face, and then the paint cans would finish them off. I laughed, and then I heard it. A step, a pause, another step. Someone was coming down the stairs outside. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I told myself it was just a neighbor coming home late. But then, why were they moving like that? And then, the sound came. A whisper, muffled, indistinct. Someone was standing right outside my door, whispering into the keyhole. I wanted to run, to hide, but I couldn't move. I wasn't even breathing. Open, my head spun. The TV kept playing the scene with the burglars, but I wasn't watching anymore. All I could see was the dark apartment. The mirror gave a hazy reflection of my pale face. The apartment was silent. The only sound was the scraping of my toothbrush against my teeth. After finishing up, I walked through the apartment one last time, turned off the light in the living room, stepped into the hallway, and then into my bedroom. I avoided looking at the windows. Everything was in its place. The front door was locked, just like it should be. Everything was fine. I crawled under my blanket, pulled it up to my chin, and closed my eyes. A knock. Soft, but distinct. I opened my eyes and slowly turned my head toward the clock. 12:12. A cold wave rolled through my chest. That sound, it was the exact same as in my dream. I didn't breathe. The knock came again. This time, louder. More insistent. There was nothing else. Usually at night I'd hear something. The elevator creaking, a door closing, footsteps in the hallway. But now, nothing. And then, open, it's me. Mom's voice. Relief rushed through me, but something was off. Mom never said she'd be home this early. And yet, I slipped out of bed. On tiptoe, I crept into the hallway. Maybe Mom wasn't feeling well and she decided to come back early. Or maybe something had happened to Dad. An accident? A crash? What if? He's never coming back? And the closed door. My eyelids felt heavy. I blinked. And suddenly, I woke up. The TV was showing a test pattern. I must have dozed off. The movie had ended a long time ago. I rubbed my face trying to shake off the drowsiness and looked at the clock. 12:02. My heart started pounding. Dad's words echoed in my head. At 12:12, don't get out of bed, don't turn on the lights, don't open the door. I still had 10 minutes. I had time. I yawned, got up from the couch, and walked to the bathroom. As I passed by, I flipped on the light. The thought that something had happened to Dad made my stomach twist with fear. I ran to the hallway, but the moment I reached the door, my legs froze. Something was wrong. There was no noise behind the door. No breathing, no rustling, only a smell. Faint, but strange, sweet. Like the smell of fish scraps left in the trash overnight. Mark, Mom's voice. Closer, louder, my hands trembled. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a stool, dragged it to the door. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it shook the whole apartment. I climbed onto the stool, pressed my face against the freezing peephole, and there she was. Mom. I nearly threw the door open, but something stopped me. She was wrong. Her face pale, her eyes black, motionless, like they were painted on. Her arms hung limply at her sides, fingers twitching slightly. Mom? I swallowed. No answer. She didn't move. Her eyes were downcast, her body unnaturally still, like a rag doll propped up on a stand. And then her head snapped to the side. I flinched. The motion was jerky, unnatural. And then she moved, or rather, glided, toward the door. Her legs barely moved, as if she were being pulled forward on invisible strings. I couldn't move. My fingers dug into the edge of the door, my knuckles turning white. And then, Mom suddenly ran and slammed into the door. Boom. The impact was so strong that the stool beneath me wobbled. I crashed to the floor, landed on my elbow, cried out, froze. Outside, another slam, a body hitting the door, this time, harder. I screamed and, not thinking, ran to my bedroom. I dove under the blanket, pulling it over my head, curled into a ball, didn't dare to breathe. The warmth under the blanket turned to suffocating heat. The fabric stuck to my face, the air grew thick, wet, but I couldn't make myself come out. And then, another hit against the door, softer than the first, but strong enough to make the bed tremble beneath me. And then, the doorbell rang. Thin, sharp, piercing. It kept ringing, longer than usual, until suddenly, silence. the kind where even my own breathing felt too loud. I clutched the blanket, gripping it so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Then, a knock. Again. And then, something scraped against the door. I froze. I knew that sound. Rough, soft, like fingernails dragging across wood. I shut my eyes, clenched my teeth, covered my ears with my hands. Told myself, I'm dreaming. I'll wake up. Mom and Dad are home. Everything's fine. But then, I opened my eyes, and through the thin fabric of my blanket, I saw it, the light in my room, flickering. Once, again, and then everything stopped. The knocking, the doorbell. Only silence. Heavy, oppressive. I lay there, a minute, 2, 3, and then I moved. Slowly, I crawled out from under the blanket. I looked at the clock. 12:12. The hand hadn't moved, not even a millimeter. I barely had time to think when the phone suddenly rang. Sharp, piercing. It felt like it wasn't coming from the living room, but from inside my own head. I didn't want to get up. I shouldn't get up. But the phone kept ringing, ringing without stopping. What if it was my parents? But then, her face, the one I saw through the peephole. Horrifying, lifeless. What if that really was Mom, and I didn't let her in? I jumped up, ran to the phone, grabbed the receiver. My fingers shook. I almost dropped it, but somehow I held on and whispered into the receiver. Hello? Hi? I froze. Dad, the music was gone. No voices, no laughter, only his voice. Soft, clear, too clear, as if he wasn't speaking through the phone, but standing right behind me. Hi, son. How are you? Everything okay? Yeah. I forced out. Good. His voice was soft, gentle, almost soothing. Do you remember what I told you? I swallowed hard. Yes, repeated. I stood frozen. The receiver felt damp in my hand. Don't watch TV for too long. Turn off all the lights before bed. At 12:12, don't get out of bed. Don't open the door for anyone. Good. Dad smiled. I could hear it, even though I couldn't see him. You're a good boy, Mark. I'm proud of you. I gripped the phone tighter. Are you afraid that Mom and I will die? My mouth opened, but I couldn't speak. How did he know? What I'd been thinking all night? Yes. Then listen to me. I nodded. Okay. First, don't hang up. I clutched the phone with both hands. Okay. Second, cover all the mirrors. I shuddered. With what? Find something black. I nodded quickly. Jumped to my feet. Okay. Hurry, son. Dad's voice grew sharper. We don't have much time. I threw the receiver onto the table, rushed to find something black. Closet. Dresser. Room. I pulled everything out. A t-shirt, a sweater, a towel. Didn't matter. A mirror hung in the hallway. Big. Old. I flung the sweater over it. Didn't even secure it. Ran to the bathroom and froze. In the mirror, I saw my own face. Pale. Terrified. I slammed the door shut, as if that would help. Then grabbed Dad's towel, covered the mirror. One more left. Mom's mirror, in their bedroom. I didn't want to go there. It felt like she was waiting. Hollow black eyes. Still. Watching. But Dad said I had to. I stepped inside. Didn't look around. The mirror sat on the dresser. Tall. Framed in swirling patterns. Dark. Empty. And in the dim light, something moved. I hurled the t-shirt at it. Ran back, holding my breath. It's done. I gasped into the phone. Good job, Mark. Dad's voice was warm, proud. I swallowed hard. The fear was still there, but his words like a cup of hot tea on a freezing night. Dad knows what to do. He'll help me. Now, he said, go to the door. Turn the lock a few times, then push the door. I froze. Why? Just do it, son. It's important. I took a shaky breath. Okay, my voice came out hoarse. I walked to the door. It felt taller, heavier, darker. I reached for the lock, fingers trembling. Click once. And then, from the other side of the door, something moved. Not a knock, not a voice, a rustle. Faint, barely there, like someone taking a deep breath. I froze. My heart pounded against my ribs so loud it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. Then the voice on the phone exploded. Deafening, ice-cold terror crashing over me. If you don't open the door, they will die. My father's voice had changed. No warmth, no kindness, only steel. Cold, merciless steel. My lips went numb. Your parents will die. The line crackled with a rasping breath, heavy and unnatural, like someone else was breathing directly into the phone. Dad, I'll cut them, Mark. His voice dropped, rough like grinding metal. Slowly, inch by inch, I'll hold them down so they can't struggle, so they can hear each other's screams. I squeezed my eyes shut, lips moving silently. No, no. Then I'll hang them. His voice slithered, a hiss like a snake coiling to strike. And the rats will come, hundreds of them, crawling into their mouths, their eyes, tearing at their flesh until there's nothing left. Shut up. My voice broke, but he didn't stop. They'll scream for you, call your name, but you won't hear them, because the rats will fill their throats. Stop, stop, stop. Your mother will claw at the walls until her nails rip off. You have no idea how loud she'll scream, Mark. I screamed. She'll choke on her own blood. And your father? You won't help her. He'll die too. Die, die. My hand slipped. The phone hit the floor with a dull thud, the plastic casing cracking on impact. But the voice didn't stop. You'll be alone, forever. Your parents will never come back. Never. I curled into a ball, hands over my ears. Don't listen. Don't hear the horror seeping from the walls, from the darkness itself. I need to turn on the light. I lunged for the switch, nearly tripping. My foot caught the phone cord, yanking it taut. Click. Click. The darkness didn't move. I darted to the living room, flicked the next switch. Nothing. The kitchen. Nothing. Not a single light in the entire apartment. My breath hitched, hands shaking. I kept pressing, slamming, clawing at the walls. Nothing. The light was dead. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something in the window. At first, just a shadow. I froze, blood pounding in my ears. Then, a face appeared. I will never forget it. It was wrong, inhuman. The eyes too deep, like empty pits. The mouth, a long black slit. It didn't move, it just stared. We lived on the 4th floor. It couldn't be there. And yet it hovered outside my window. Nausea twisted my stomach. I stumbled back, but I couldn't look away. The face didn't disappear. No. It was getting closer. I bolted, sprinting to my room. My fingers scraped against the walls, grasping at furniture. The darkness thickened, shifting. Everything was different. I knew where the dresser was, where the coat rack stood, where the shelf should be. But the moment I reached out, my hand touched something else, something that shouldn't be there. The wall was soft, sticky. I tripped over a chair, and I swear, it was breathing. Then my hand slammed into something smooth, round. It moved. I yanked my fingers away, not wanting to know what it was, and scrambled blindly toward my bedroom door. Something slick squelched beneath my foot. I yelped, jerked back, pressed against the wall, and screamed, because for a split second, I felt it. A hand grabbing me from behind, heart pounding. I fumbled forward, reached my bed, threw myself onto it, curled into the farthest corner. The room trembled. Everywhere, thumps, rustling, creaking, beneath the floor, inside the walls. Something scraped against the wood, dry, sharp like fingernails. And then, a whisper. Voices, too faint to understand, like a distant radio signal lost in static. And suddenly, from the living room, a familiar tune, the theme from Home Alone, but wrong. Too slow, too deep, like an old cassette tape warping in a dying player. The low notes stretched, distorted into a hollow drone. Outside the window, something moved. Shadows, voices, laughing. The rustling crept closer. I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed. I screamed until my chest burned. Every sound melted into chaos. Scraping, rustling, laughter. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Then, like someone had thrown a heavy blanket over the room, everything muffled. The noise faded. The pounding was still there, but it no longer crawled under my skin. I gasped for air, my head spinning. This is a dream. It has to be a dream. I glanced at the clock, 12:12. It had been 12:12 for too long. I stared at the numbers, heart hammering. Time wasn't moving. With trembling fingers, I grabbed the clock, turned the dial. The second hand twitched, the minute hand crept forward. 12:30, 12:45, 1. The whispers faded, the music died. I kept turning. 1:15, 1:32, silence. Then, click, the light flickered on. Darkness unraveled. My room looked normal. Bed, desk, bookshelf, everything in place except the air, heavy, like the moment after a storm. I listened. Nothing. Too quiet. Mom and Dad should have been home by now. Slowly, I swung my legs over the bed, wrapped myself in the blanket, and froze. Footsteps. Right outside my door, I held my breath. The key slid into the lock, turned. I clutched the blanket so hard my fingers ached.